Good morning, everyone. How are you? How the heck are you, I should say? Um, it's probably obvious by now that I'm going to be talking about kindness and empathy. We're all part of this Brooks community. Every student, every Brooks employee, and every resident, and every single one of us brings value and enrichment. We need to be kind. We need to be patient. We need to be empathetic. Sometimes it's hard, and sometimes we fail. But we need to keep trying to understand each other. We need to take some time and step outside of ourselves and think about what it's like to truly walk in someone else's shoes. I feel fortunate to be here at Brooks School, and I also feel very fortunate to have had the very life experiences I had before I got here. Some good, some not so good, but all part of who I am, all part of what makes me get up in the morning, do the things I do every day. It's part of my ethical and personal belief system, my desire to be part of a community and the responsibilities that go into that community, as well as the rewards that I get from the community. Life, I live here, I work here, my husband lives here, he works here, my daughter graduated from Brooks, so this place is pretty much part of my everyday life. Whether I'm working or not working. It's my community. As has been pointed out by many who have stood right here before you, in order for you to better understand my point of view, you may need to know a little bit more about me, about how I came to hold these views about community, my beliefs, my way of life, and so here it goes. Both of my parents grew up on farms, and Dad is the oldest of what would eventually be 14 children. He had to quit school in the 3rd grade to work the farm. Mom was the youngest of 11 children, and she had to quit school at the end of 7th grade to get a job to help support the family when her mother could no longer keep the farm running. The amazing part of my mom's story is that her father died 2 months before she was born. And my grandmother worked that farm as a single parent with 11 children for 13 years. Think about that for a moment. Put yourself in that woman's shoes. She's 4 feet 10 inches tall. She lives on a farm in a house without central heat, electricity, or running water in the cold province of Quebec. She's 40 years old. She's 7 months pregnant with her 11th child, and her husband dies. That's amazing. The woman was incredibly resilient. So because of my family's history, I grew up feeling extremely lucky. We had food on the table. We had a roof over our heads. We had not one, but 2 cars. We had clean clothes. We had central heat, electricity, and water, and most importantly, my parents mentioned all the time when we complained about doing our homework, we got to go to school. It was really sort of pressed into our heads when we were complaining about doing our homework, when the reports came in, I'm sorry, but you get to go to school. Well, when I was a kid, I had to pick potatoes, I had to feed the pigs, I had to do all of that stuff, but you get to go to school. You're lucky. And they're right. But in order for all of that to work, with 6 children, we had things that we had to do at home because both of my parents worked full-time. Luckily for me, they're well organized. So it took a lot of preparation and forethought to get the day going. So here's just a typical day. This is going to explain a lot about me and the dining hall and all that kind of stuff. Here's a typical weekday. Mom and Dad get up about 5:30 in the morning. And while still in her bathrobe, my mom would make breakfast for my dad and coffee for the both of them, and she'd get out all of the breakfast fixings for us. Dad would be out of the house by 6, and then Mom would get dressed for work. Around 6:15, she'd take all the fixings for breakfast, put them on the table, so we could compile them for ourselves, and then she'd wake up all 6 of us. While we were eating, she'd take all the fixings out for lunch, and then we'd make our own lunches, and some went over an assembly line. We'd all get dressed, grab our supplies and lunches, and walk either to the bus or to school, and then Mom would be off for work. Um, After school, we'd get home. It was all clockwork. It was amazing. After school, we'd get home and look at the chore list on the fridge. If it was your turn to make dinner, and everybody took turns making dinner starting at the age of 10, you looked at the menu for dinner and you followed Mom's explicit directions, all in a handy notebook labeled supper in big letters. And said supper had to be on the table at 5:15. The directions might go something like this. Menu: meatloaf, mashed potatoes, green beans. 3 o'clock, peel 10 potatoes, wash, cut, and put in pan with water to cover. Put it aside. 3:30, turn the oven on to 350. 3:30, chop half an onion. Take the ground beef out of the fridge, put it in a large bowl on counter, blah, 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 et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Till eventually, Mom and Dad would get home around 4:45, and Mom would make sure that someone else had set the table. She'd get changed, and then she'd come help with dinner. Dad would take a shower. He was a construction worker, so he needed to take a shower before we all sat down to dinner together. And then we would sit and we would all eat together. But it wasn't done there. When dinner was done, one of us kids would clear the table while another one washed the dishes and someone else dried. It was all on a chart, prepared a week in advance, and you knew what your job was and you just did it. Later on, if one of us sat down at the kitchen table after dinner to do our homework and the table wasn't clean, you can bet we'd find that sister whose job it was to clean the table and tell/ask her to clean it again so we could do our homework. She might balk and give you a look of pure hatred at that moment, or she'd say she was sorry, she hadn't realized it wasn't clean enough, and I'm sure I was in that position myself. But either way, she'd clean the table again, sometimes with the added encouragement of Mom or Dad. You know what I'm talking about. And in return, you'd always say thank you. No comment or hard feelings afterwards. Done, over, move on to the next thing. So at this point, you might be saying, oh my God, what would happen if you didn't do your job? And the answer is, that never happened. It never, ever happened. I'm not even kidding. I had a conversation with a faculty member a few years ago, and he was in disbelief that it just never happened. But it would have been, to behave that way, would have been the ultimate sign of disrespect to everyone in the family. It said that you thought that your time was more valuable than their time, and it's not a good move. Not in your best interest in the long run to have the members of your family think that you think more, that your time is more valuable than theirs. It doesn't mean that there weren't exceptions, but we were expected to be responsible and take care of those exceptions ahead of time. If I had a concert on a Friday night and it was my turn to do the dishes, but there was a time conflict, I would either arrange with one of my siblings or one of my parents ahead of time to take care of that. We might switch duties, or they might do it out of the kindness of their heart, knowing that I'd step in when they needed my help too. If one of us was sick, somebody else would just step in and do it. And often in that case, it was Mom or Dad, which was really nice to see them standing there washing the dishes when one of us kids was supposed to be doing it. On Saturdays, you couldn't leave the house until your chores were done. If you needed to leave early for a game or for a lesson, you either got up early and did the chore, or again, arranged for a sibling or a parent to do it for you. Those chores included the major things, like washing the kitchen floor, cleaning the bathroom, vacuuming the living room. No one was exempt. It was part of the family. You're in that community. It was just assumed that you had to do it. But of course, nothing's really ever that simple. In the 10th grade, I was on a wait list for lessons with an amazing flute teacher, Mrs. Bruno. And I got the call one day that she had some time and could fit me in on Saturdays at 10 a.m. So I was really excited that I got to take flute lessons with her, but also 10 a.m. was prime chore time, and I didn't know how I was going to be able to swing that. It meant I had to get up early and do my chores before I could go, but it was about 10 miles away from home. So it also meant that my dad had to drive me, which meant that it was going to take his time away from doing his chores. So we sat down and we struck a deal, my dad and I. He'd pay for the lessons every week. He'd drive me to and from the lesson, but I had to get up early to help him do his Saturday morning yard work in order for that to happen. He respected my desire to take flute lessons, and I respected the time he would take out of his day, as well as the money he was putting into it. It brought us closer. Um, it was one of those things that sort of made us smile when our eyes accidentally met over the dinner table. It was respect, it was caring, and it was love. The life lessons in this give and take to me is that everyone's time is valuable. And if you want to receive respect and consideration, you need to give respect and consideration. If we want to reap the rewards of being in a community, we must all be part of building it, supporting, and maintaining that community. Now, there's many ways we can do this at Brooks. Many ways to strengthen the community by doing even the littlest of things. Try to look at the big picture when you're making simple, everyday decisions. How can your small gesture or effort make this a stronger community? There's a trickle-down effect to our actions and lack of action. It takes some forethought and kindness and thinking about walking a mile in someone else's shoes as well. But here's an example of what I mean by the littlest of things. For some reason that I don't understand, and maybe somebody can tell me later, at Brooks, many people put their used napkins inside a cup or a glass after their meals, and they put that cup on the dish carousel. And now someone, either a dining hall staff member or a dish crew member, has to take that napkin out of the cup and throw it away. You say big deal. But what you probably don't realize is that that happens a minimum of 100 times a day, probably 200 times a day. Also, people don't always scrape their plates into the trash or they forget to throw their paper products in the trash or leave them on their plates for someone else to deal. I know that I've probably done this before without even thinking, but when I think about it, I do, but I don't always remember. But what would happen, right, if we all remembered to scrape our plates? If we all remembered to throw our napkins in the trash? I know it sounds really simple and trivial, but you know what? It could mean that your best friend or your little sister or your little brother can leave dish crew early, play a game of Frisbee, just go for a walk with you, talk with you. It could mean that maybe a dorm mate now has more time to spend in the dorm and help build that area of your community. It could mean that a member of the dining hall staff now has extra time after lunch to prepare what could turn out to be your favorite dessert. Or it could make them more relaxed and hurried and able to have a conversation with you. We'd have more time to get to know each other. By doing a simple thing like these things, you could quite possibly make someone's day better. There is a trickle-down effect. And that person would never know that you're one of the people responsible for that, and you'll never know you made their day better, but the place will be a stronger place to live in. Well, it's important to think about these things and to think about, it's also important to be empathetic to someone who's struggling. Maybe they weren't at their best in a game and are having a really hard time with that. They felt like they let people down. Maybe they're having real issues in one of their classes and are worried. Maybe their mom just called them to tell them they shouldn't come home for the weekend because the electricity was turned off. Maybe they're figuring out a way to try to tell you that the reason they can't go to the Target run on Saturdays is because they don't have enough money and they're embarrassed. Maybe their parents are going through a divorce. It could be a number of things. It could be a number of things. We don't know. Sometimes when it appears as if someone is being inconsiderate or disrespectful, they're just having a bad day. They're just having a hard time. And they need your compassion, understanding, and they need your empathy. It's hard to figure out what it is, but think about it. Try to think about it. So here's my promise to you guys. As a member of this community, I'm going to try very hard to assume that we're all well-intentioned. I have to have that assumption. I'm going to assume that you believe that my time is as valuable as your time. I'm going to assume that if you believe that if I have behaved disrespectfully to you, you'll not get angry. You'll not assume that I'm a selfish, inconsiderate ass, okay? Instead, I hope that you feel comfortable enough to approach me and talk about it. I want to know. For else, how can I change for the better? Perhaps there's more things than meets the eye that you are unaware of, or that I'm unaware of. No one's close to perfect. I will do the same with you. It's going to be hard sometimes. But above all, I'm going to assume that you are not going to abuse my assumptions by using trickery or deceit. I'm going to trust you. There'll be moments in our lives when we're frustrated with the actions of others. In this community of the United States, I'm currently dealing with frustrations with the actions of those in this country that are racist. Some of those people are just not good people. They're disrespectful. They're selfish. They're arrogant. I can't respect that. I'm at a deep loss to understand it. Like many of you, I'm at a loss to find ways to fix it. Sometimes I get so angry and frustrated, I don't know what to do. I just don't know what to do with that emotion. I can't understand those actions at all. But what I can do is help this community to be at its best. And so can you. To be strong. I stand here and I look at you folks and I see the future. I see hope. I see a way that maybe we can make a difference in the world through embracing a personal belief system that includes integrity and kindness and empathy. So, what do you say, Brooks School? Let's be thoughtful. Let's be empathetic. Let's be kind. Let's change the world for the better, starting right now. Thank you very much.